Thanks for joining us for this election information roundtable. I'm Nick Cool with the Corporate Communications Department here at the City of Lethbridge. With me today are Mayor Chris Spearman and Councillor Rob Miyashiro. Thank you both for volunteering and joining me today. So what will we be doing today, and why are these two my guests? Well, we have set this panel up to discuss general information and insight on experiences from your collective terms of council to educate potential candidates running in this year's municipal election in October. These current members of council have declared their intention to not seek re-election in 2021. Unlike a typical election forum, we will not be discussing hot topic issues in depth. We will not have a timer, and our panelists don't have a rebuttal card. This is designed to be a free-flowing discussion for information. This panel session is being recorded and it will be uploaded to the City of Lethbridge election webpage and will be accessible until Election Day on October 18th. I will act as the facilitator for the session and pose 10 questions to each panelist. We will rotate who answers first, and each panelist will have a chance to answer each question. So let's begin. One format we will keep from a traditional election forum is starting in alphabetical order. So, Councillor Miyashiro, first question to you. What is important to know, and what would you have liked to have known before becoming an elected official?
Yeah, thanks, Nick, and thanks for having us today. You know, the most important thing I think prospective candidates need to know is that they need to recognize what they don't know. Council has oversight over budget policy and capital spending, and those things are all reflected in how the city operates. So you might have a lot of knowledge of, let's say, social issues and programs, but how does that help you make decisions on infrastructure utilities? So you need to come in and try to educate yourself about what the city does. I would have liked to have a better understanding, I think, of the scope and impact of what council's decisions were or had on the effect of the city prior to my first term, just in order to better prepare me for what was ahead, for me to understand a bit better about the process between how we get from A to B.
Mayor Spearman?
I think it's important to understand, you know, what it means to be an elected official and have some experience in that. I think I benefited from having served previously for 18 years on a school board and having chaired a school board and having had interactions with government ministers in the past, and having that that's really the role that you're playing, is as an advocate for the city. You also have to make important decisions on behalf of all citizens, recognizing that it's very difficult to satisfy everybody. I think the old statement is you can satisfy 100% of the people some of the time. You can satisfy some of the people 100% of the time, but you can never satisfy all the people all of the time. And recognize that you're going to make decisions on a regular basis. Some people will agree, some people won't agree, and you'll be criticized, and never more so than now. The role of social media has really accelerated. So I don't think anybody anticipated that. I think what would I have liked to have known before becoming an elected official? Well, there's a lot of things. As Councillor Miyashiro has said, not all members know, not any one member knows all about any issue. So the strength of council is having 9 different people with different perspectives, different experiences. And the most important thing is to learn and listen and be open. So those are the key things. And of course, there's lots of things I would have liked to have known when I first ran for Lethbridge City Council. I thought, well, I have elected experience and I have a good knowledge of economic development, and I've had a background in finances, so I think I'm well prepared. But in terms of social issues, that certainly was a challenge for me. And we have significant social issues in the city, and there are no easy solutions to those social issues. It's not moving a few bucks from here to there and you're going to solve it. You can't do that. These are people related issues, and you need to have systems and supports to resolve them over time.
Right.
Kind of related to the first question, we'll get into the second question, starting again with you, Mr. Mayor. How can you best prepare yourself for this role, and what skills and/or experience would be helpful? I know you kind of touched on that a little bit in your previous answer, but if you want to expand on that a little bit here.
Yeah, I think there's a realistic political role to play, and it's not just about I'm right or my views are right. It's how do we get to a point where the council can all agree on one point of view, and that is an ongoing challenge. Council needs to be as one in order to effectively advocate for the city and its citizens. So if you always have a challenge of dissent all the time, it's very difficult to move forward. So there's an element of trust. Those things you have to work on all the time. And again, no easy solutions. And you need to, politics is not about who's right and who's wrong. Politics is about allies. And hopefully your colleagues around the council are your allies when you're trying to get things accomplished and trying to convince the provincial or federal government to help you.
And Councillor Miyashiro, same question. How can you best prepare yourself for this role, and what skills and/or experience would be helpful?
So, you know, and I think it might be different from what Mayor Spearman's talking about, and certainly in this role as mayor, it's slightly different from someone that's running for council. I think people that are running for council, especially from, well, first timers, obviously, you can prepare yourself by reading everything possible related to council in the city. So, because everything you need is on the city's website. Council strategic plans, city annual report, master plans. Look at some of our agenda decision items, and then look at the news releases that people like you do, Nick, because you summarize council decisions nicely, and people can get a better understanding of the decisions made. People need to understand what taxes the city collects and what those tax dollars are used for. So when you're having a discussion pre-election, and you have knowledge of the issues, and you have knowledge of how the city, a little bit of knowledge about how the city operates, you can make yourself way more prepared for things that are to come. I think moving into, for prospective candidates moving into the election, the most helpful skills you have are your ability to read and comprehend the material. Aside from all the other stuff that Mayor Spearman talked about as previous experience or skills, you have to read a lot of information. You need to be able to read it and understand it. And then you need to also recognize that when you don't understand something fully, ask for expert help, which is usually city staff. Get that assistance on the issues so that you can understand better. You also need the ability to ask questions to get to the heart of the matter. Asking questions is something that council does and needs to do all the time in order to understand how to make a decision. You need to be prepared so that you can ask those kinds of questions. So those things all flow together. You can ask really good questions, and you can ask questions that dig deep and require analysis if you're not prepared and you haven't read the material.
I would agree. And I think other members of council learn from the questions that are asked around in the discussion. So it might not even be your question, but listening to the answers when other councillors ask questions as well is really helpful.
You know, Mayor Spearman too, if you know this is that if you're well prepared, even in debate, you can change people's minds. If you're well prepared and you can state your case very well, I know there's been a number of times when we were able, either of us, been able to persuade council's vote in a closing. So I think that's important too. Be prepared, ask the right questions, and be prepared to answer things that are asked of you.
That's some great insight from both of you in that question. Thanks very much. Going into the next question to you, Councillor Miyashiro. You're in a bit of a unique position on this one. Just you and one of your colleagues, only two of you on the current council have outside full-time jobs. So your perspective here would be really interesting to hear, I think. What is the time commitment for council? And then Mayor will be a little bit different for you, but we'll start with you, Councillor Miyashiro.
Yeah, and thanks for that question. It's interesting. If you have a full-time job, you need to use vacation time for council things. unless your employer is willing to let you go and not compensate your company back for that time. I'm in a unique position as I actually am in a pretty busy job, so I need to make up time for my work after everyone's gone home or on weekends. So first, right out of the chute, orientation after the election. It's almost 8 full days over the first, what, 2.5 weeks. So if you are employed, you need to take that time off, because that orientation is so important for first-time counselors, even returning counselors, that you can't afford to miss any of it. Now you have you're oriented, you're sworn in. There's council meetings every other Tuesday, which start at 12:30 in the afternoon with the in-camera session, or earlier. Sometimes there are issues that we have to deal with that we have to start the in-camera session at 11 a.m. Um, then the council meetings themselves can last 6 hours or more. We've had council meetings go until 8:30 at night. Um, then we have standing policy committees, right? So every councillor has to sit on at least two SPCs, as well as the economic standing policy committees. And there are other connected committees, boards, and commissions that require at least one counselor, such as Audit Committee, Police Commission, Green Acres Foundation, Galt Museum, Public Library, Airport Committee. Those, and there's others. So it's not just the council meeting that people see, or the standing policy committees that people see more. It's all the other work that we have to do, that adds up to a little bit more than just part-time.
Can you maybe give a quick comment too about something like an operating budget week or a capital CIP project week on your case specific as
Yeah, I
well?
was just talking to you about this, Nick, and it's interesting is that, because of COVID, no one's really taken many holidays or vacation days. So in the last year and a half, some of my vacation time from my work has been for budget reopening week and the CIP. So that was my great use of my vacation time from work.
Yeah, I think it's a good point to note that those weeks are big commitments too for somebody, especially in your position there. So moving over to you, Mr. Mayor, I know let's discuss maybe a little bit of pre-pandemic time when there's a lot more public appearances in a case for the mayor here, and moving forward on that type of time commitment. Maybe your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's in addition to all the work in the committees, the mayor is the chief spokesperson for council, and community organizations expect the mayor to be present in their various events, and they're all important events. So you'll have charitable occasions. They're the organizations that give back to the city and support our citizens and support young people. You're expected to attend those, give greetings on behalf of council. The Chamber of Commerce events, for example, or others, business events. So you're attending all those types of things. You're also attending the Alberta Urban Municipalities Association along with councillors. So you're taking time off to do that. And that for a councillor is possibly vacation time as well. There is the annual Federation of Canadian Municipalities as well, important to be part of that. And there are funding opportunities available from both of those organizations if you participate in their programs. And it's important as well to liaise with other councils and other mayors. So I'm in different groups where I'm meeting with the Southwest mayors and reeves, or I'm meeting with the mid-sized city mayors, or having regular conversations with the mayors of the two largest cities and the mayor of Red Deer on issues like ambulance dispatch. So these are things that are all additional, but pre-pandemic, I could count on pretty much having to spend Thursday nights, Friday nights, and Saturday nights at social events, sometimes more than one in an evening. And my policy was that if I was going somewhere, I would stay for at least an hour. I wasn't going to go give greetings and run out the door. So I would make sure that I understood something about the organization, and I would take time to talk with people at the organization leaders, to say, okay, what messages, are there messages that you would like me to present on behalf of the city? In addition, I would do some preparation and my assistant would help. And but I prepare as much as possible, but certainly the social part of it was important. And then as Councillor Miyashiro has talked about it, then you've got to do your preparation. So council meetings used to be on Mondays, so I meant Sundays is usually the day you're reading the agenda package at least, and now you get an extra day, you get Monday as well. But it is a significant time commitment, and I used to say it's about 80 hours a week. Of course, I worked for about 40 years in the private sector before I became the mayor, and I would put in a lot of extra time as a senior manager at a private employer here in the industrial park in Lethbridge, and I think my working hours per week went from 50 to about 80 when I became the mayor.
And that's the biggest difference, for prospective candidates. The difference between mayor and councilors are the mayor's full-time.
Yeah.
And full-time plus, as we heard, and we're lucky, and Chris was able to count on council members as well when he couldn't do his 6 in one day. He'd ask us if we could help, and then he'd only go to 4 or 5.
Yeah, and that highlights the importance of having the deputy mayor and acting mayor for different roles involved as well, and the time commitments and appearances as well. We kind of touched on this a little bit, but the next question, we'll start with you, Mayor Spearman. Let's revise it slightly from what does a typical day or week look like to let's dive a little bit more further into maybe what is a typical advance of council meeting week. So we're recording this on a Friday. You have the agenda for Tuesday's council meeting. It's very full. Can you maybe just give us a little bit of like how you will prepare ahead of that meeting?
Okay, so the upcoming agenda is unusually large. There's 2,000 pages to this agenda. It's usually about 400 to 600 pages sometimes. I'd say that's not unusual. So recognize that you're going to have to put in reading time about the length of a significant novel on topics that are, you will struggle to understand. And you're getting expertise, hopefully an executive summary in a lot of that will help you understand what the key issues are, and there will be a recommendation from administration. So nobody wants to be a rubber stamp. You want to ask intelligent questions, but certainly preparing for meetings is a significant commitment. So I would say on the week before the council meeting, it's probably at minimum about 4 to 6 hours and maybe longer. So you need to fully understand those issues. Sometimes ask questions ahead of the meeting. If you really want good answers, you can send your questions to the city manager or his reports and let them know you'll be asking a certain question, and then they can have a prepared answer for you. Or have the information readily available. But that's the key part. But the challenge is managing your time, because you've got personal commitments a lot of the time too. Family birthday parties. I hate to sacrifice stuff like that. But you want to have a social life. If you have a wife, a partner, or then there has to be some balance there as well. So you're trying to commit to your public role as well as balance your life. But during the week, there's in my case, a lot of correspondence. There is, whether it's emails or whether it's formal letters, whether it's meetings, so meetings with other elected officials can take a couple of hours each sometimes, and you're building all of that into your schedule. It's very helpful to have an executive assistant to manage the schedule for you, because I live off my calendar, off my smartphone, and that's the thing that keeps. There are so many things that you would be surprised you couldn't possibly manage all of that without supports. So it's a significant commitment. Your calendar basically runs your life. and preparation for not only council meetings, but all your other meetings is important. So whether the issue is something like EMS dispatch or another issue you have in common with other municipalities, you have to prepare for those meetings and get information so you can discuss at those meetings, you can discuss issues intelligently as well.
And Councillor Miyashiro, go ahead on the same, yeah.
Yeah, so and I think to expand a bit on what Mayor Spearman just said is, why do we have 2,000 pages or 600 pages of information? And that goes back to what I said earlier about going to the council agenda online and seeing the information that we need to sift through. The public gets, for the public meeting of council, the public gets exactly the same information the council gets. And that is because of the law. We can't get secret information like some people think we get. The public gets what we get for the public part of the meeting. So, for example, if you need to figure out why it's so much, sometimes we get subdivision information. Sometimes we get area structure plans. We get engineering plans for roadways. And like Chris said, you can look at the executive summary, but you need more information sometimes, and it does take, some of these documents take a while to read. And as I said earlier, is if you don't understand, you need to get a hold of the staff and say, hey, what does this mean? Does this mean what I think it means? Because if you go into council meeting thinking one way and you're asking questions, and then all of a sudden one of the directors or managers says, yeah, that's not exactly right. I think you've got that confused with something else. Really, you kind of undermine your own credibility as well as speaking about things that you actually don't know what you're talking about. The prep time that mayor talked about as well is important. But again, the mayor's full time, and the mayor has a whole bunch of other responsibilities that council members don't have. But the fact that we all have to read the information and be prepared for the meeting is the same for everybody. I mean, he's right. You look at the package, you figure out, okay, I'm going to read so much right now. I'm going to have to read a bit on Saturday. I'm going to have to go over it again maybe Sunday and Monday, just so you have a better understanding. There's very few people that can read it once and have a full understanding of what it is they're up against.
No, thank you both for those answers. I think that was great insight to that too, on how the meeting isn't just show up at, in your case, 12:30 for closed session before, and then 1:30 on Tuesday for the public meeting. There's a lot more to it that goes in ahead of time. So let's switch gears a little bit. You talked a little bit about how, we'll start with you here, Councillor Miyashiro, that your role as council itself is only part-time technically, but I'd say while you're out in the community, maybe outside of your inner circle, you're still Councillor Miyashiro full-time and not just Rob. Can you tell me a little bit about your interaction and engagement with the public?
It's quite interesting that people find there's an expectation by many people in the city that councillors will engage and must engage with them just because the residents want them to. And Mayor Spearman can talk to that as well. They expect that we will respond to every email, that we respond to every phone call. Sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes logistically, if there's an issue and you get 100, 200 emails or 50 phone calls, you do not have enough time to respond to all those. And people just need to understand that. We're the only level of government probably that gets that level of interaction with the public. And most people have understand that. So some of my colleagues are really good at responding to every, hey, councillor, we need to talk, call or email that comes around. But I tend to triage things according to what I think, one is the tone, what I perceive to be the tone or level of rudeness, let's say. Is the contact people are making trying to insult me, or do they think, or do they really want to have a dialogue? And you can pick that up very quickly. And I'm saying this because it's true. And I'm not saying this because I'm trying to put people off. It's we don't have really the time or energy to pick fights with people or to have them pick fights with us, because it's really counterproductive. So you have to be able to understand that. Are people trying to pick a fight because they don't like your position? I will respond to most contacts that are made to me personally or specifically, because a lot are blanket sent to the council mailbox. And again, as you said earlier, Nick, there are times when you're at a community event or a sporting event or grocery shopping, right? And you can't avoid people. Or just some random public space, walking your dog in a park or the dog run, where people approach you to have a discussion. And those are the times, those real personal interactions that you need to spend the time and have a chat with someone, right? So if it takes you an hour to do grocery shopping for 5 items, it happens. And it's really hard to just walk away from people and cut them off at that point. I actually prefer to have those kind of random meetings with people and have them ask me than the people that send some of the emails and phone calls that we get.
And same question to you, Mayor Spearman. You're Mayor Spearman 24/7, whether you're at a meeting, you're at home, you're at a grocery store, you're at a Hurricanes or a Bulls game. This, what is your interaction and engagement with the public like, knowing you're in this role 24/7?
Yeah, it can be awkward at times, but it just comes with the job. And sometimes people help me a little bit. If I'm out at a social event, or if I'm with my family or with some friends, and people come over, and sometimes people can be aggressive about, it's not really appropriate. And quite often the people with me will say, hey, the mayor's here on his personal time. Would you find a more appropriate time to raise your issue? But you are going to be confronted with that, and I know that comes with the job as well. People see me as the mayor and feel they have the opportunity. I tell people, Lethbridge is in a situation where are we a large Raymond, or are we a small Calgary? And we have a number of complex issues in the city of Lethbridge, many of the same types of issues you would have in a large city. But there are people, and they have an issue that affects them directly, and they want the mayor to hear about it, or they want their councillor to hear about it. And so it's an issue that applies maybe specifically to them, or they have a strong opinion on an issue, and they feel they have the right to let their elected representatives know how they feel. But it's very difficult to manage that in the time. So we all try to be respectful to the public and give them the due. But it is challenging when I think people don't appreciate the workload and that all members of council have, and the things that we're all trying to do in order to be prepared. And it's very difficult to dedicate a lot of time to an individual on multiple occasions on issues that they feel are important. And that's a challenge. Yeah. So I would say the interaction with the public, I think, in a lot of ways is very positive when you can speak to a group. I was giving state of the city addresses to the Chamber of Commerce, and there would be questions that would follow. And you try to bring material that will help people understand things like taxation, and then answer questions. And quite often people say, well, I didn't realize that. I didn't, that gives me a different perspective. And if you can speak to groups and speak in public, and then invite questions afterwards, quite often that's a very, very good way to engage with the public. So there are different ways of doing that. I was always open to doing that. And of course, I try to discuss issues in my regular monthly columns that are published in the Herald and online. So I think we try to help engage the public and help them understand in a number of different ways. And our communication staff really helps as well. The council summaries help explain issues and decisions that council makes. So I hope that we're able to do that. But I think some people's expectations are very much the same as they would be if they were in a small town, and it's just not possible for all members of council to meet that expectation and still do their jobs.
Thank you both. 1 point each for a nod to the communications department so far. Thank you on behalf of our staff. Switching gears a little bit to Mayor Spearman, back to you. I know from when you were first elected for your first term and then to your second term, and it's ever evolving scenario of different issues in the city. But is the role what you expected from when you started to second term to now?
I think there's a lot of satisfaction in accomplishing things, and the chain of office for the mayor has the names of all the mayors, previous mayors, and the point is you build on what previous councils and mayors have done. And so I think in terms of the accomplishments that we'll talk about, the city has grown, and good things have been done. And that's what my goal was, is to make Lethbridge a better city, and to provide services and facilities that we previously didn't have, and to promote economic development, to create a healthy economy for the city. So to make sure that we had things that people see as attractive in a city. And I think that was positive. The challenge, of course, is the social issues. And, I really had no previous experience dealing or resolving social issues. And I think that's a huge challenge. It's when you're dealing with people issues and people's behaviors, people with addictions, people with mental health problems, that you're much more drawn to that in a smaller city like Lethbridge. So that's the part that I think it's been part of the last 8 years for sure, and a difficult issue to resolve, and we're looking at new ways of trying to involve the community in solutions to promote understanding, but very difficult to resolve those as a mayor and a council.
Thank you for that. And obviously, it's very hard to predict what issues might arise that aren't even necessarily on the full radar when you run for council to midterm or beyond. Councillor Miyashiro, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts too about if the role is kind of what you expected from when you first ran to now when you're set to step away.
Yeah, so prior to being elected the first time, you have this expectation of council that there's going to be public scrutiny, and that you're going to have lots of reading, and you're going to have to juggle your time and try to balance, your full-time job with council, with family and outside interests. And really all that is very close to what I expected, but not the sum of it. So all those individual things certainly were what I expected, and certainly happened. But the sum of it and the amount of all of those things to have to deal with, I think was a little bit less expected from me. So that was what kind of took me off guard. Obviously, this term was a little bit different, knowing what to expect, knowing kind of the issues that we're up against were a little bit different, knowing the financial restraints on municipalities in our province. It makes your mindset change a little bit, and really made us have to work better together as a council. Even with the people that dissent most of the time, it's still part of that whole council process, and we still had to work together to get things done. That was a bit different than our first term when we had a lot of wins in the first term. And we walked out of the first term with a lot accomplished and a lot less social unrest. And then a bunch of other things happened that we had to deal with that maybe weren't our role to deal with, but it was thrust upon us.
Going off of that too, and we'll start right back to you, Councillor Miyashiro. Is there anything you would have done differently in your terms? And obviously, we're down to, I believe, only 6 or 7 council meetings left in your term here, which, when you say it that way, is not very many. And obviously, by the time people watch this, that could be less even. So, is there anything you would have done differently?
It'd be nice if I didn't have such a big mouth, but that's something I can't change. So I'm not sure if I really would have done anything differently. I'm outspoken on issues that I feel are important, or sometimes I'm just outspoken. I will challenge my colleagues on what they say and they do, and you've seen that some of them are not so fond of that behavior. But that's part of who I am and what I do in order to get a point across, or in order to extract information out of other people on council. I prepare for council and committee meetings, and I seek expert advice for things that I need clarification on, or further understanding. It's really, I guess it'd be easy to look back on things and say, yeah, I'd do this and this and this differently. But given my circumstance with work and with council and the committees that I've been on, I don't think I would have done anything differently. I really don't. And Mayor Spearman, same question to you.
Yeah, I think, I think, Yeah, I think what could we have done differently? I think as a council, we could have spent more time together. I think COVID limited that somewhat. But if you can get together and hash out your differences behind closed doors, we need to work on governance a little more. So there was greater unity on council. So I think my recommendation to the next council, for what it's worth, is there should be an emphasis on understanding what good governance looks like and spending time on an ongoing basis revisiting key things like the strategic plan. How are we progressing on our collective goals? And how do we work together? And that would be helpful to do. I think some of the divisions on council were exacerbated by the fact that we just weren't meeting together. We were meeting remotely, and everybody's in their own silo at that point. Very difficult to build unity, but hopefully I wish the next council well, but you have to work at that. It's kind of like working at a marriage. If you don't if you don't do it, the challenge is, things aren't going to go well, and you need to find ways to work together in order to get things done on behalf of the people you represent.
Yeah, it's a great answer, and it kind of leads right into the next question, Mayor Spearman, about what are some of the challenges of the role, and like maybe relationship building, and especially during this pandemic, meeting remotely has definitely been a challenge for people, I would imagine. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the challenges are always trying to have a consistent way of working together and building trust. So councillors have to trust each other in order to get things done, and things move more quickly. If people are skeptical about the motives of other councillors, they will not. It'll be harder to bring people to agreement. But if we're moving forward on key things that are important in the strategic plan, if we're saying we all agreed to do this, uh, how are we going to make sure that it gets done? How are we going to promote economic development? So one of the big issues we have, people say taxes are too high in Lethbridge. The big challenges we have are that we have a relatively low level of non-residential taxation. So the tax base is a smaller percentage than in most other cities. So the burden falls on residential taxpayers. How do we attract more non-residential taxpayers to the city? There's also a large number of organizations in the city and entities, some of them government, but properties in the city that pay no municipal tax. Again, that puts the burden on the remaining taxpayers. As we go forward, we have to promote things like economic development and what are the catalyst projects that are going to encourage others to invest in our city. So we're investing in things like the airport and in the agri-food hub at Lethbridge Exhibition, things that we hope will cause others to say, good things are happening in Lethbridge. We've got a college, a university, a good supply of trained individuals who can support the economy. And we want to invest there and create employment. And those are things that you want to lead in as councillors. And sometimes you don't see some of the small decisions, how they impact the big picture. Reconciliation would be another thing, and it's much less easy to measure. But how do you make progress? How do you build trust with different people who are part of your community? And how do you bring people together, which is the whole point of reconciliation, to have mutual respect and common understanding, and making sure that we can give everyone the same chances, the same opportunities that live in our city.
You sure you're not running again?
You said, are you sure you're not running again?
Not running again.
Thank you for that.
That sounded like a
115 days to go.
Counts as of recording, yes. Councillor Miyashiro, same question.
That's the way
some of the
Chris
challenges for the role here that you've seen over your terms.
I agree with what the mayor said about building relationships and building trust is a very important thing, and that is a challenge when you have a group like we are with a whole bunch of different opinions and outlooks on things. Big challenge for me personally is I think to to be a bit more patient when I feel that people aren't doing what I think they need to be doing in terms of putting in the work or being prepared for our meetings. I think I've been less than patient with that. And I probably could have worked on that a bit more. So for me, that was a challenge. Not everybody prepares for things the same way. Another huge challenge, I think, for people coming in is that they need to have a thick skin. And Chris and I have talked about this before. You have to really try not to be reactive. Can't be reactive to people, can't be reactive to the media, can't be reactive to situations or to each other. And I say try because I wasn't always that successful at it. Some people just push your buttons, and you really need to make a conscious decision how to respond. And I have no other way to say that, right? So Chris mentioned some real highlights for us. You know, one of the really big things that we accomplished, one of the first in Canada, was for our Reconciliation Lethbridge Advisory Committee to work with the city to come up with a recreation plan. The Truth Recreation Reconciliation Plan. We were one of the first municipalities to do that. We just signed a memorandum of understanding of working together with the Blood Tribe Chief and Council. It's a huge thing. Other big highlights for me: ATB Center build out, the Henderson Lake Pool rebuild. We reworked the census to be more inclusive. We banned the promotion of conversion therapy. We had support for the rainbow and trans crosswalks. Those are the things that were highlights for me because they showed an inclusiveness and our willingness to do things for the greater good for the whole community. Some of those things were not seen as better for the community by certain factions in the community. But on the whole, in the big picture, is those things were good for the whole community. And they were certainly highlights for me.
And just, I'll go back to Councillor Miyashiro just to finish that, and then we'll get to you, Mayor, just since you kind of led in between that hybrid question here into what are some of your fondest memories? You touched on some there. We'll start with you, Councillor Miyashiro, and then Mr. Mayor will get to you in a moment.
And then this also relates to working together to getting things done. You know, as Mayor said about building the relationships, there were times when we had to build relationships. So the times when I was able to build relationships with my colleagues and work together to achieve common goals and to get things done for the common good of the city, not just trying to bludgeon people with debate or during questions. Right, it's truly trying to work together and getting a resolution worded properly and understanding the issue and moving forward some progress with different things. One of the things that I really enjoyed is getting to know the city staff on a different level, to work with the senior management team and managers to achieve positive outcomes for the city. And because we need to have those relationships as well, I think incoming people need to understand that it isn't council against the administration. It's council and administration need to work together. And I think that's something that even people in administration need to realize, that the council is not the enemy. And that the more administration works with council, the better outcomes for the whole city. And I think that's in the relationship that needs to work on as well. The council needs to be seen as a facilitator to get things done. Council cannot be seen as an impediment to people doing their work. One of the fondest memories for me is hearing good things about our city from people from other places. So when someone from Edmonton and Montreal even, or Toronto, talks about some great experience they had in Lethbridge, those are things that we know are occurring that sometimes our own residents don't see because they live here and they don't realize these things are going on. The mayor talks about when he's hosted meetings of other dignitaries from other places, and they comment really positively about Lethbridge. Some things that our residents and even our council doesn't see because we're in this all the time. Those are the things I think are fond memories for me as well.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. And there's Spearman, some of your, I know there's probably plenty to pick from, but maybe some of your highlights and favorite memories from your terms. I know there's been lots of positive accomplishments over your 2 terms here.
Yeah, it really has been positive, and I have a sense of satisfaction. And I think to pick up where I had mentioned before, I think council has to understand that the enemies aren't around the horseshoe. You know, it's important to have diverse views presented prior to a decision, but once this council's made decisions, all members of council have to support it. And you know, in order to get those things done, so things had to happen. You know, in order to attract Cavendish, for example, you know, we had to have a serviced industrial park, and we didn't qualify for the provincial funding for clean water and wastewater infrastructure. I had to go and talk to the provincial government and say, this is an important project. It's the largest private investment in the city's history, potentially. And how do we get the money? And, you know, the provincial government at the time said, well, we're not going to give you any money. You don't qualify it, but we'll potentially green light the federal funding if they'll give you the money. And so the federal government was giving the infrastructure money to the province, and the province was redistributing it. And so they made an exception, and you had to be able to go and talk, and we all had to support the fact that we wanted to attract significant investment to our industrial park. And you have to recognize that Cavendish chose to buy land at the far end of the sharing industrial park. There was no servicing, but by investing in the infrastructure, we not only service Cavendish, but every other industry that may come and purchase land in the intervening spaces. So that helped us develop our industrial park. But you need to have council working together to support decisions in the best interests of the city to make them happen. Other important things that happened were building the leisure center. So getting the leisure center built, and Councillor Miyashiro was the chair of the committee, but that was a significant accomplishment for the city of Lethbridge. There were about 20 other cities in the province that had a leisure center, but Lethbridge didn't. And now we have one. And once COVID is over, people will fully appreciate what we have. It's I think one of the second largest leisure center in the province, behind only one in Fort McMurray. So that was fantastic. Completing Legacy Park was, you know, having a third regional park in the city was a significant accomplishment. I think, yeah, I think people in the north side correctly could say, hey, you know, there's Henderson Park, there's Nicholas Sharon Park, and where's our park? And they now have a nice park with a lot of unique features in it that don't exist in the other two parks. And it's nice to have a park that'll not only service not just the north side, that will attract people from other parts of the city to go to as well. So those are some significant things. Certainly reconciliation was important. And you know, as Councillor Miyashiro said, when I hosted the mid-sized city mayors, they came here and they thought, wow, you know, Lethbridge has all these problems. And then they walked around and they said, wow, we took them on a tour. We showed them our industrial park. We showed them things like our downtown bus shelter. When I walked past the bus shelter, people thanked me. You know, especially in the wintertime, you know, when the weather is poor, and saying, wow, thanks for building this bus shelter. People forget that, you know, there are others in the city who rely exclusively on public transit to get around, and having things like a bus shelter and appropriate parking. People say there's never enough parking downtown. And, you know, now we have parking, we have the bus shelter. So that's moved the city along as well. People aren't standing on the corner waiting for the bus, and we've made things a little better for people. And there's other programs that council has carried on. We always want to make sure that our city is accessible for all, you know, people who have physical disabilities or challenges, that we continue to look after the needs to make Lethbridge a friendly city. Councillor Miyashiro can talk about age friendly as well. How are we managing and designing our city to make sure that everyone feels welcome.
Yeah.
We take for granted all the, I think there's 10 parks in our river valley. We take for granted our neighborhood parks. City has designed all of those. We maintain all of those, and it adds to the quality of life in the city. So I'm very proud of what the city has to offer. And it's a very affordable city. Right now, the cost of housing in the city of Lethbridge is amongst the lowest in Canada.
Yeah.
What an opportunity. You hear every day about the struggles people have elsewhere in buying homes. Can you imagine young people being able to buy homes in the city of Lethbridge and work here and have careers? That's we we have a tremendous opportunity. So those are the things that I'm proud of in Lethbridge. And of course, the work that we're doing to bring people together, to make sure that there's understanding. And reconciliation is certainly one where we've made a lot of progress, and there's still a lot to do. And I hope that the next council will continue that work.
So, you know, Chris, one of the things I was thinking about when you were talking is one thing that people need to recognize that we're now considered to be one of the places for refugees to come to because of how well they're accepted. In our first term, the Syrian refugee crisis was underway, and we had hundreds of Syrian refugees, and the entire community pulled together to help them. And their resettlement, there's been fewer resettlement issues, I think, for them than there has been in the past. We have the largest Bhutanese refugee population in Canada. Now they're not refugees anymore. They're business owners and they're strong members of our community. And I think that's something that people need. Maybe we're not quite as redneck as people think we are, right? Maybe we are a bit more accepting of newer people. The neighborhood I live in Legacy Ridge in North Lethbridge is very diverse. I hazard to guess how many people from different countries live here, but it's you walk around the neighborhood and it's not I think a typical Lethbridge neighborhood. So those are some things I think that listening to you just twigged me to the other side of not just the great economic things that we've done, but really we've made a great effort into making us a lot more inclusive and welcoming.
Thank you both for those answers. I think there's lots of great things that have been accomplished, and there's lots of routes for things moving forward. Mary, you touched on the airport renovations moving forward, things that we haven't seen come to fruition yet. The encouragement and financial support with the exhibition and Exolution project, advancing the Indigenous placemaking strategy from the next CIP, plus all those other CIP projects. I think you guys have laid the groundwork for a lot of items moving forward as well. So. Thank you for all your work on that. Let's wrap up this session today here with Mayor Spearman. Last question here. Any final thoughts or advice you can give to potential candidates for this October?
Final thoughts and advice. I think Lethbridge is growing, and there will be challenges in the city of Lethbridge that big cities have. So I think my advice is to try to work together as council. Make sure that you agree on a strategic plan when you're elected, and that you're all working to support the goals of that strategic plan. If there are some people who are unhappy with some of the goals in the strategic plan, continued backbiting throughout council will undermine what people can do. And if you're critical of what others are trying to do, they will naturally not be as supportive of what you're trying to do. So I think everybody wins when people work together. And that would be my advice to people running for the next council. Be open to the ideas of others. Your ideas are not the exclusive ideas, and you may not always be right. You have to work together. You have to reflect sometimes when people bring up ideas that seem foreign to you, and give them careful consideration and support, and be open to changing your mind.
Yeah.
Great advice. And Councillor Miyashiro, same question to you. Advice to potential candidates for this year's election.
Yeah, I'll build on a bit what the mayor said is, and I don't want to be trite about this, but people need to be true to themselves. They can't come and try to portray something that they're not, because I think the public will see through that very quickly. Make decisions that you would normally in a discussion with you would have with your friends or neighbors. That's who you are. In trying to portray someone who you're not, people will see that you're insincere. People will see that you're just trying to play games with them. So really be yourself. Secondly, and following up with what the mayor just said about be able to change your mind, be flexible. Don't come in with such a solid position that it can't be changed. I know that every single person on council at some point during the last 2 terms has changed their mind about something during either questions or debate. And you can see people, and people have even said that. People have said, oh, I heard some things that I hadn't realized. I heard some things that made me think that maybe my position wasn't the one that we should be going with. And then this happened a couple of weeks ago. It will happen further in the next couple of weeks. But I think people need to understand that one is you certainly be yourself, and secondly, be flexible and be willing to change your position and be willing to change your mind if someone can convince you to do so. In that, any potential candidate needs to understand that it's an honor to serve the people of Lethbridge, and I know Chris would agree with me on this. It's not to be taken lightly, even though you might not take yourself seriously sometimes. The position is something to be taken seriously. You make serious decisions. You make life-changing decisions for people that live in the city of Lethbridge and some of our staff. And if you don't come in understanding that, be prepared, then I don't think you're going to be as effective as a councillor. So those are some of the things that I think my final thoughts are.
Great. Well, that wraps up our questions for this session. Thank you both very much for all of your answers and insight. I think people can hopefully get a lot of knowledge out of this. And thank you both for your time today for doing this and for your years on council. I think on behalf of the city and on the city Big C Corporation and the city residents, thank you for that. And we wish you all the best of luck moving forward.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Chris.
Yep. Thank you. I hope everybody stays positive and recognizes we have a great city.
Yeah, absolutely.